No, I can't hear you.
Sometimes it's so hard to keep the dark thoughts out. I don't know how to feel. Let's hop on a plane and fly down to Brazil. Yeah.
You can hear me now, can't you?
On a bad
Yeah, now I
day.
can.
Tylenol gave
What
me a
platform is
headache.
this? I've not seen it
Maybe I'll
before.
stay inside.
Oh, this is
My
Ecamm
anti-paradise.
Live,
Ah,
which
Do we
is
speak the
gotcha.
same language?
yeah,
Yeah,
you gotta get
I've heard him.
Always
It's
ready
only
to
for an Apple
fight, but we
product though,
light up the
right?
room, so I guess it's
Yeah,
alright. I don't wanna check
That's the
the
thing. That's how they
time.
get
yeah,
everybody.
right. Of course, of course.
But I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful platform.
6 years down,
I
got
love
my
it.
head in the clouds.
Well, it
Sometimes
Um,
looks
it's so hard to
beautiful.
keep the dark
oh,
thoughts out.
and the functionality,
I don't know how to
everything you can
feel.
do with it
Let's hop on a
is
plane and
amazing.
fly down to
Like,
Brazil. Yeah.
I can actually
Time don't
control
stop, and I
your
don't wanna
camera
waste it waiting for something that
from
I
here.
keep on chasing.
Well,
Yeah,
at least it just, I don't know how the
Let's hop
encoder
on
did
a
it, but
plane and fly down to Brazil.
it's amazing. Like I
Okay,
can
let's go
literally
down
go
to
in
Brazil.
and
Tell me
change the
if you're
tint,
down, dog. Tell me how you
saturation.
feel.
I
I've
can
been
move you
feeling down,
around.
though. If I'm being real,
Um,
we
nice.
need to get out,
yeah,
y'all.
it's
Summer
really
out
good.
in
I think
Rio. I got all these
I think
feelings and I always tend to
I'm
bottle
not sure
them.
if they're
I don't
trying to
want no
come out
bottles
with
that distance you with your problems. I
a
thought I
version
was
that's
on enough.
that's
Think I need a way out. I'ma
PCs
buy the
as well.
sneakers any day now.
But
Probably not.
man, I highly recommend it.
Okay.
You know what a lot of people do? They get
What?
max just so they can get this platform.
Oh yes, I can't do that. I can't do that yet. Can't.
Oh man. Yeah, I
But
mean,
I appreciate that. It's how beautiful it is. But I'm used to using StreamYard, so that's why I asked.
oh yeah, StreamYard. Yeah, that's another good
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I gotta talk. This is we're about to start. You good to go?
Yeah, I'm good.
Well, hello out there, everybody live watching us. It's your Words for Change podcast. I am super duper excited to have all of you here today watching. Those of you who are watching on LinkedIn, you're watching on, LinkedIn, Facebook, and everybody out there in YouTube land. I am so happy that you are here watching us as well. Just let you know that I'm excited to have you along. Man, I am super duper pumped because of a guest we come through. But before we talk about our guest, I need you to do me a favor. Will you please go ahead on and hit that subscribe button on YouTube and make sure you follow us on all our social platforms because we are excited about all the information and opportunities we provide for you to grow spiritually, personally, leading to social change. But I have a saying, nothing changes until you change. And that's what we're all about. We're all about helping people to grow personally, spiritually, and leading to an impact in your community, wherever that may be. We do that through podcasting, public speaking, coaching, and so many other platforms. And so please go ahead on. And if this is your first time checking us out here on YouTube, hey, welcome. I'm Lionel. Excited to have you join the party. So this is a community that we're still in the process of building. And we are usually live or on Sundays at 3 p.m. or, as we say in the military, 1500 Pacific Standard Time. And so, yeah, we're excited to have you on board. So, hey, before we get the show started, grab your favorite cup of coffee or a favorite drink. And we're going to come back on the other side of the show with our favorite guest. You ready? Let's go. Well, we're back with our guest today, the one and only Miss Shay Sparks. How you doing, Shay?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited, and your music's got me a little jazzed up. So this is fun.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, we've been trying to, we've worked hard to get this actual interview to actually happen. And so super duper excited that you are joining the show. And man, I'm telling you, you're doing some great things out there. So, hey, before we get
Mm.
started, why don't you tell everybody who you are and kind of like what do you do for a calling or purpose and mission? Because I know you have one.
Yeah, so who I am is an energetic catalyst and fearless communicator. And what I do is I am a certified fearless living coach. I am a speaker. I am a podcaster of the Power of Investing in People podcast. And I am an author of How to Get Your Voice Back, as well as a co founder of the book project called Fire Starters. So those are the many things that I do, but I also am an advocate for veterans. So thank you. Thanks for having me. This is going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, obviously, I'm a military guy. Everybody that listening audience knows that. So when you said the coaching angle by which you come at helping people, how you're called to help people, tell us a little bit about that. I didn't catch the verbiage quite well, but do you mind repeating that one more time? I want to make sure I get that correct.
Yeah, so I'm a certified fearless living
Fe-
coach and
All right.
trainer. And it all came about out of a conversation I was having with my dad, actually. He is a veteran. And about 6 months before he passed away, he was telling me the story of how he was drafted to Korea.
Mm,
And he didn't even mention that it was the Vietnam War. We just figured it out with timelines and things.
mm,
But up until then, my entire life, I thought he had enlisted. I had no idea that he was drafted. And so, as he's telling us this story about his time over there, I believe I've asked him something about his job, what he did over there. And my dad answered with the phrase of, I didn't have a choice.
mm,
And when he said that, Lionel, I got to tell you, those words like permeated my soul
mm,
because I realized like how many times have I said that fear-based phrase,
mm,
right? I was already going through my training to become a fearless living coach. And when he said that, it was like, just like, I can't even describe it to you. Like, boom, this is exactly where I'm at and what I'm supposed to be doing because I know I found myself in an
mm,
abusive relationship for many years saying that same thing. Like, I don't
mm,
have a choice. I made my bed. I have to lie in it. And unfortunately, at the time, so things that I never really mentioned out loud to anyone, but things that were in the back of my head were, well, I'm just waiting for him to kill me. So
what?
yeah. So I really didn't feel like I had a choice. So going through my coaching program, I realized like, no, my purpose here is to help others find that they have choices. So
Mm,
when they feel pressure or when they feel that there's only one way, my job is to come in as a guide and to say, no, look, let's look at all the choices. And now, mind you, we can make up choices, right? But there's
right,
so
right.
many different choices that we have rather than just living with this I don't have a choice mentality, which I really feel like my dad had kind of brought back with him
Mm,
from the Vietnam War, and really I inherited that. And I think back to my brothers and that are older than me and growing up in our homes as children, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure we all thought like this was it. We didn't really have a choice. So I'm thrilled to be able to be called into a higher purpose in
mm.
helping others find their choices.
Well, I was sitting in church earlier today, and I thought about calling, and
Mm,
sometimes we go through life and we sort of go through the motions, and in that going through the motions, we can forget that there's a bigger purpose for us in the universe. There's a reason why we're here, and for me, I'll be the first to admit, as a chaplain and as a person who has a family and have other commitments, like I get lost in the sauce sometimes.
Mhm.
Busy with family and busy with just kind of going through the routine. And it was almost like a gut check this morning, like in while sitting in church, and I just began to journal in church about this whole concept of calling. So can you talk
Mhm.
about how maybe your life experiences can be used as the platform by which you serve the world?
Well,
Mm,
this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, so I'm so glad that you brought it up. So, after I was able to get out of the relationship I was in, I started to do several things, and one of them was really look at my life as from the lens of, what is it that I don't know that I
mm,
need to know in order to move forward? Number 1. And then number 2, I had a friend of mine give me this Christian counselor's phone number probably 2 or 3 years beforehand, and I held on to it in my wallet, knowing that at some point I was gonna utilize it, and so at that time, I called him immediately, and within the first week of my ex's accident, I was able to get in with him and really start the healing process,
mm.
because statistics will tell you that a abused person, now I'm not even gonna say woman anymore,
Yeah,
abused
yeah, sure.
person, they will go back to either the same person multiple times. It takes like 7 times, I believe the statistic is 7 to 9 times, I
Mm,
believe, to actually break up and get away for good. And then when they do, statistics are very probable and high that they will go back to someone who's very similar to that same person. So
mm,
I really dove into, okay, clearly I was in this relationship and I don't want to repeat it. So I started my healing process. And mind you, I had started to really trying to break up with him for years prior.
mm, mm,
And when I was on this healing journey, it was probably several months in. At the time, my career was a hairstylist. And so clients would come in and, the conversation I would always start with what's new, what's going on, what's happening in your life. And they would share with me. And then normally at the second half of the conversation, they would say, well, what about you? And I would say, oh my gosh, you're never going to believe what I learned about myself this week. I learned that I am so bad at really sharing what it is I'm thinking and what it is I'm feeling, because I like to wrap things up in sarcasm, which
mm.
is really anger in a clown suit. So
Ooh.
it's right? So it's really hard for me to be vulnerable. And even at the time of my life, I couldn't even pronounce the word. It was like but what? And so I was just even saying it out loud to my hair clients. It was, like, excruciatingly painful for me to do.
Mm,
So then I'm telling them this. I'm like, "So I learned that for me to actually say what I mean and mean what I say, I have to be vulnerable,
mm,
and I have to
mm.
practice being vulnerable." And I've
Right.
started to do so with the people in my family.
Mm,
So they were like, "Wow, that's so profound. I never thought about that." I like to use sarcasm too because I think I'm funny. And I thought, yeah, I thought I was funny too until I realized that it's really not communicating.
mm,
What it really is just hiding what you're really trying to say and expecting them to figure it out.
mm. Wow, good point. Hey, so wow, just want to say hello out there. We got Flo saying hello, and she let's see, let me see if I can pull that back here.
How's it going? All the stuff that we've done so far.
Sorry, my
Oh,
phone just
oh,
started
is that you?
talking out of nowhere. I'm like, okay.
I was like, ho, what is
Literally, it's not on. I have no clue why.
that?
There's no apps on, nothing. I was like,
Here, let me help you. Let me help you.
No, 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 no.
It's
That's what
like
happens when you're live, right?
yeah, yeah, I know. It's cool. Right. So Flo says, she said, hey, oh gosh, she said how that wow, that's deep.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, my comment got like super stretched all the way over, so I had to figure that out here in a minute. But she said, hey, that's deep. How about I do that? She said, hey, that's deep. And then she said she loves the perspective. There it
Mhm.
is. She says she loves the perspective on sarcasm. Hey, it is a very interesting. Let's see if I can get that out of there. It is a very, very interesting uh, form of dealing with our own trauma,
Yeah,
sarcasm, right? And not to
right.
say that everyone who practices or uses or engages in any form of sarcasm is because they're trying to hide trauma, right? We're
Right,
not making
right.
that comment, but at the
No.
same time, speak to people who who are out there and they're going through some pretty hard stuff that they're dealing with, and just not talking to people have roundabout ways of going about doing it. What can you say to those individuals who maybe are covering up stuff because they've even never dealt with it, don't want to deal with it, or they're wanting someone to figure out what's going on? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
That's like boom, that right there. The
Right.
figuring
Right.
out what's going on. So that's
Yeah.
really where I was, right? And when after talking with my clients and sharing with my clients, that's where they were too. Like
Mm.
they really wanted someone to dig deeper and ask better questions. Like
Mm-hmm.
could have been their boss, could have been their team members, could have been their parents.
Right.
Even as adult children, we still have parents, right? And want our parents to pour into us and love us. And so it was really fascinating to learn from sharing with my hair clients what was happening in their lives. So they
Right.
would go away 4 to 6 weeks after I told them something, and then they
Mm-hmm.
would come back and they would say, "Oh my gosh, you're never going to believe what happened. I did what you said and I really started to be vulnerable and started to think about what it is I really wanted to communicate."
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just the first thing that flies out of my mouth, which is that funny sarcasm, because we're funny, right?
Right.
And instead of focusing on that, I really was focusing on, okay, what is it that I want to convey to this other person so that they'll understand where I'm coming from, rather than having them have an expect or me having an expectations that they're going to just figure it out, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And they said it was amazing what ended up happening, and it changed their dynamic with their boss, their team, their children, their spouse, their parent. And I said, "Well, it's funny because that's what happened with my dad."
Mm.
So my dad and I had tumultuous relationships for most of my teenage and most of my childhood into my 20s, maybe most into my 30s even. In fact, it wasn't until the last 5 years of his life that he became my best friend. But it
Mm.
was
Mm.
because of all of the work that I had put in changing the way I spoke to him.
Mm. Mm.
So it's really, I believe, about the words that we say. We have to be extremely mindful and
Right.
think about what it is that we want to talk about, what it is that we're trying to communicate to the other person, and come from a place of non judgment and non criticism. At the time I was doing all this with my dad, I said, "Dad, what I hear you're saying to me is that what you're doing is you're asking me to do something, but you're not really asking me in a question. You're telling me in a statement, and then you're going to be disappointed in me if I don't do that thing. So what I'm seeing is that you're trying to manipulate me. Is that your
Mm.
intent? Are you trying to manipulate me?"
Mm.
And he was like, the same way I was with the word vulnerable. He was like, manipulate. Like,
Just
I don't even know what that means.
yeah.
And I said, "Well, Dad, it sounds like you're trying to ask me a question, but you didn't ask a question. You
Mm.
actually didn't ask me to do anything. You're telling me and expecting me to do it, and then you're going to be extremely disappointed if I don't do it."
Mm.
So that I realized led to my whole, like, how I just wanna please others growing up because that's what we did in our household, was
Mhm.
we were in a, well, if you didn't do it, then you got reprimanded, but really there was not even a question to be asked, it was this statement, and, it wasn't until many years later that I understood what narcissists are and what gaslighting was,
Mhm.
and my dad was definitely had those characteristics. Obviously he didn't have the diagnosis, the psychological diagnosis, but he had a lot of those characteristics and behavior. And to really understand that we have to be mindful with our words
Mm.
and then ask clarifying questions. And it's
Right.
okay that when someone says to you something, and I had to learn this phrase, which I never in a million years had ever used this phrase together in a sentence.
Mm.
I don't understand. Can you please
Mm.
clarify that for me?
Mm.
Instead, I would just laugh it off or agree or, pretend to know or guess what the answer was rather than to go, no, wait a minute. What's really going on here?
Right.
When my
Well, no,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Yeah, great point. While you're talking, and you made me think about the scripture verse that says, "Life and death is in the power of the tongue,"
Mm,
and how
mm,
powerful words are, particularly in this conversation. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just want to put
yeah.
that in there. Um, uh, when you were talking about that very very interesting relationship between you and your dad. So did you ever work that out, or I mean, like, what was the impact of that on your life going forward? Was it something that you always thought about, reverted back to?
Oh, yeah. So my
Mm.
dad was a very unemotional person. I would
Mm.
I would categorize him as emotionally unavailable. So
Oh.
I didn't get from either my mom or my dad, I didn't get hugged or told I was loved until I was 16 from my mom and I was 18 from my dad.
Mm.
And so, it wasn't until I'm in this healing process that I'm talking to the Christian counselor, and he's like, "You have to love your dad the way you want to be loved, because we have to teach people how to love us.
Mm.
And if he doesn't know how to love, then you have to teach him now at this stage in your life how to love him." And I said, "Well, what if I reach out and hug him and it's awkward?" And he said, this wise Christian counselor I went to, and he saved my life. He said, "Do it anyway.
Mm.
Let it be awkward, and then continue to do it until it's no longer awkward."
But once I mean, were you fearful of rejection? Like,
Oh
did you feel,
yeah.
like, how'd you deal
Oh,
with that?
oh yeah. I realized that rejection was a attachment to the outcome that my dad was going to be a certain way.
Mm.
So when I let go of expectation of him becoming or being a certain way and just loved him in exactly where he was at and being, okay, he's just this emotionally unavailable person, and I'm going to reach out and love him the way I need to be loved no matter
Mm.
what.
Mm.
And
Wow.
then that way my outcome is attached to how I show up, not how he shows up.
Well, but and I'm thinking about folks in marriages.
Right.
Think about that, right? Because people who are married or in relationship. If you're giving what you're giving to your spouse because you're expecting a return on that investment,
Mm,
am I right about that for the most
yes.
part? But
Yeah.
what about giving something out and you're not getting this, not reciprocal?
Yeah.
So how do you like? How many
Yeah.
people are dealing with that one? Flo said.
Right.
Flo said. She said. She said I heard that one my whole life from my grandmother. I'm not sure what you mean by that one, Flo. If you can clarify. And then she said, "Wow, that was a gem. Love him how you want to be loved." Jesus
Yes,
said that.
huge, huge.
And then she said, Shay, she said she's going to use that advice.
Yay. Yay, Flo.
but
Joe,
but
it's
talk,
Joe.
yeah, Joe,
Yeah,
Joe,
thank
yes,
you.
sorry, Flow with Joe, sorry,
Yes.
Flow with Joe podcast. By the way, what's up, Joe? Um, so yeah, talk about that, right? This is an issue that I deal with a lot in the military. Um,
Mhm,
counseling people who are married and they're not. It's the relationship is not reciprocal. Shay,
mhm.
it's not reciprocal, and people, when people, obviously, I encourage people to do more counseling and therapy,
Right,
but some people, even that has to be reciprocal, right?
right. Yeah.
That person, that your partner has to want to go through the counseling, the marriage counseling or therapy, right? So like what about I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Mhm.
Someone out there who says, you know what, I hear you, I understand, but this person is not giving it back to me, so I'm not giving it back to them. Should you be concerned about that all at all
Mm.
when you
Yeah.
help us out?
Yeah, so there's 2 books, when I was going through this healing journey in the beginning stages that I read, and one was called Boundaries, and the other one was called Women Who Love Too Much, which really should be
Mm,
named People Who Love Too Hard,
mm,
and it's about this codependency expectation type of love that we have.
mm,
So a lot of times we love people in the hopes that they will
mm,
reciprocate it, because what we're really trying to do is heal a relationship from our childhood.
mm. Oh, you
So,
speaking now. You preaching.
amen, because our childhood experiences shape our adult decisions.
Amen.
So a lot of times we get in, especially when we're young, right? When
Right.
we're high school and 20s, we get into relationships. And I won't even say young because, I have clients that are in their 50s who are
Mm-hmm.
continuing to choose relationships that literally mirror the relationship that he had with his mother. So every woman that he ever
Ooh.
dated, it treats him the same way that his mother treated him,
Ooh.
right?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Hold on,
So
hold on,
there's
hold on. Hold on. You gotta pause. You gotta
yeah.
pause that one.
Okay.
You got to pause that one. Wait a minute. Oh, how many people I've talked to, and I'm talking about gentlemen, and they're in counseling and to they're talking to the wife
Yeah.
like it's the the child or like
Mm.
the mom. Like,
Yeah.
and Shay,
Yeah.
it does drive me crazy. And not to be judgmental, but I'm like, man, I hope I never do that with my wife. Now, my wife don't put up with much, so I may get a punch in the gut, or no, she doesn't do that. But she lets me know, right? But that blows my mind that some people, and I'm just talking about the guys, they're not even
Right.
aware that they're
No.
talking to their spouse like a child.
Right. Well, and it goes both ways, right? So I coach women, and that was pretty much my entire process in the beginning,
Mm,
was coaching women and helping them rebuild after an abusive relationship. Well,
mm,
now I have group coaching for men because men are being abused as well, and it's never talked about.
mm,
So they are where I'm created a group so they understand that there's a safe place that they
mm-hmm,
can share, and they can understand that it might not have been physical, but I know several men, unfortunately, who have been stabbed or shot or,
mm,
punched and things like that. But they've also been abused financially, emotionally, mentally. And that
mm-hmm.
goes back to this whole manipulation thing. And it all goes back to boundaries. And you
Right,
said it exactly in your own example. Your wife won't tolerate that.
right,
So
right.
she says something, right? Then it becomes a conversation, or at least it becomes a, I'm not gonna put up with that, right? So,
Oh.
but good
Once again. No,
but
yeah,
good
I
for
hear.
her that she learned that
Right,
at
right,
a stage in life where she was able to communicate with that with you. Most
right.
people have no idea what boundaries are or how to communicate. Hey, the way you just said that to me, or the way that you're doing this, how this is showing up for me,
Mm,
isn't okay.
right, right,
Isn't okay
right.
with me.
Wow.
And you talked about earlier, like, when is there a time to then what do you do when both people aren't reciprocal? Well, first
Mhm.
of all, both parties have to be willing. I mean,
Right,
that I believe is like number 1 absolute, and they have to
right,
be willing. And if you're not, then at some point, one of you, remember how we talked about in the beginning, you don't have a choice. Well, guess what? You both have choices,
right.
and you can make a new decision at any time. And so
Mm.
maybe it's time to just think about new decisions what you wanna on what you
Come
wanna do.
on. Come on, Shay. Come on. Don't go there because we know now you I don't disagree with you at all. It's very, very hard to make those kind of decisions. And I think I'm not going to use the D word, but
No, I'm not even talking about the D word. I'm talking about
okay.
counseling first,
All
and
right.
then
Okay, good. I
right?
was
And then
nervous. I
there's
was like,
no,
oh
no,
man.
no, no,
And by the way, let me just say this. I'm not saying that that's not optional for some people, right? Because I know that there are people who are in very, very abusive relationships, right? In
right,
so
right.
many different ways. There's different ways you can abuse someone, right? You talked about that a moment ago: financial abuse, physical, verbal, emotional.
Mhm.
That just really hurting the person. And sometimes people may do it intentionally, for sure, but sometimes they may do it unintentionally, in which I think that's when you're saying, "Hey, go to counseling." Hey, I just want to say hello, everybody, to over on there on LinkedIn. Please feel free to make a comment on YouTube or Facebook. And if you have a question for myself or for Shay, we'll answer right here and there. So, but talk about that. Talk about that decision you have to make about counseling.
Well, again, it goes back to the willing part, right? And if even if one person is not willing, I always recommend then go for yourself. And then that again just helps you reinforce what boundaries are,
Right.
right? And helps you talk it over with another person. And a lot of times, I'm sure that you have found this, but with my coaching, with me, and I am not a therapist, so let me just clarify, I'm not a therapist, but I have coached
Mm.
married couples, and 9 times out of 10, and I'm making up statistics because most statistics are made up, but um, most of the time, there's just this huge lack of communication is the issue. So
Mm.
if one person is willing to go to counseling, then start there. And then be willing to be vulnerable and share what you learned about yourself, not about what you were learning and pointing fingers at the other person. It's about what did you learn about yourself? That's why you're doing this. You're doing counseling or coaching to learn about you, not about how the other person is wrong.
Mm.
And I think that's where most couples come at it at a different view. Like, "Oh, I just wanna go to counseling, so I'll have someone on my side to prove that you're wrong." That's not
But what if they are wrong?
well, and they are, right? Sometimes they
Right.
are wrong, but that is not the intention behind continuing to go to counseling, right?
Right. Right.
And that's not me to judge, unless I will say, oftentimes, I will say, "You're being a
Right.
bad person," right? A jerk. "You're being a jerk. I'll be
There you
clean.
go.
You're being a jerk."
Hey,
And
no,
it
no, go
and
for it. Yeah.
yeah, and is that your intention to be a jerk?
Mm,
And then when you ask that, they're like, "Oh, I didn't realize that." So when I
yeah.
take this back to sarcasm, I'm gonna use my mom as example. My mom would complain. So complaining about the other person is a
Mm,
lot of times sometimes what we do, but then we don't actually tell the other person. We just complain to third and fourth and fifth and whoever will listen parties, right?
mm,
And so that's what my mom was doing. She was actually complaining about another family member. And I
mm,
was like, "Mom, why are you telling me? Are you telling
Mm,
me because you're thinking I'm going to fix it? Or are you telling me because you need to vent? And then what are you going to do about this complaint?
mm,
What is it that you can say to them? And then that's when she started to change. So she
mm,
started to then have deeper conversations and really be vulnerable and voice her concerns with this family member rather than, talking behind their back and complaining to everyone else. And
mm,
just think
mm.
about that, right? Again, in couples, how many times instead of complaining to the person that you're complaining about, you're telling everyone, your friends, your family, whoever
Right.
will listen, the person at the gas station, the person at the who says, "Hey, how are you?" and blah, verbally vomit everything that's
Mm,
wrong.
right. Right. Well,
Yeah.
hey, by the way, it looked like I don't know, maybe your internet or mine's, but it just getting a little fuzzy every now and then. So if you have any browsers open in the background, go ahead and change that. I mean, close them if you wouldn't mind. Just a little
Let
technical
me
stuff
see
for
what
the
I can
people
do here.
watching. Yeah. So no, good, great points. You know, man, I'm thinking about people who are listening, and in that communication or desire to communicate, we've learned a lot that communication is probably, I would say, next to money or infidelity. Uh, communication is probably the number one issue that I see people deal with.
Mm-hmm.
I've also, every couple and married couple really has communication issues breakdown at some point. And the goal is you just got to get back online, right? So,
Yeah.
so if communication is the big issue here, then there has to be some perspective about, hey, we're on the same team in this relationship. Like, let's deal with the problem at hand.
Mhm.
Let's not deal in like personal threats of personal vendetta you may have against another person. And here's the deal. Because if you go that route, if it becomes about a personal vendetta, then the issue is not the issue. I
Right.
would go as far as to say you may just not like the person you're with.
Yep.
Right?
Very
You
true.
understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, right? But that doesn't mean you throw in a towel, right? That just means that you have to learn to appreciate the things about the individual that brings a spark to you. Because if you're married and you're having these issues, or you've been in a relationship for a very long time, there's a lot of time, energy, and investment in
Mm.
that relationship. And it's worth to go the extra mile to sit down in front of somebody like yourself, or a therapist or a counselor or a coach like yourself, who can help you, fill in the gaps. You know what I mean?
Well, I love that you said you might not like each other because love is
Mm.
a choice. It is a
Amen.
verb.
Amen.
And liking, you might not like them 100% of every single day, right? You might not
Right.
like them at some point. So, gratitude, having an attitude of gratitude and
Mm.
really thinking about what do I appreciate? You mentioned it just a little bit ago, the appreciation. What do I appreciate about this person? What am
Right.
I grateful that this person's in my life? What is it that I fell in love with them in the first place?
Mm.
Like, take me back to that moment, right? And really
Mm.
focus on those types of things rather than focusing on the complaint, because the complaint is normally about something that is probably trivial
Right.
and wasn't
Right. Right.
handled, right?
Right.
So, and most fights might have been about something that happened, 15 years ago rather than that's
Mm-hmm.
happening in today's present. So
Right. Right.
you might have to be willing to, dare I say it, an F word, forgive.
Oh. Well, because it is hard for people to forgive, right?
Right.
Because the hurt that they
Mm,
experience, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And I also like to call it failed expectations, right? I expect you to do one, two, three. And when
Yes.
you don't fulfill that, then my I get hurt, I get damaged, I feel betrayed.
Yes.
And to forgive is almost as if to say I tolerate, or
Mm,
I am, I'm letting this person get off the hook for what they did. There's a
mm,
scripture verse in the Bible that says, vengeance is the Lord's. God will
yes.
repay. Now,
Yeah.
that's a religious response. As a chaplain and a minister and a pastor, I hear that, right? I can hear people saying that's a religious response you just made. But at
Mhm,
the end of the day, you have to think about, are you trying to hold this person captive with
mm,
anger, your
mhm,
anger? Are you trying to inflict some pain on this person implicitly? Are
mhm,
you trying to make them pay for the rest of their life for something that they may not even been aware that they hurt
mm,
you that deeply? Which is what you
mm,
said a moment ago. That's why you need to go to counseling and therapy for yourself, if that's
mhm,
the issue. But
right.
letting that person, man, you said it powerfully. Forgive. It is a powerful statement that, man, I think, Jesus talked about this. A lot of the great religious teachers in the world throughout history
Mhm,
talked about the power of forgiveness. There's something about the power of forgiveness that when we
yeah.
operate in that, it not only frees the individual from, but it also frees us as well.
I wanna talk about that just a little bit deeper if you
Yeah.
don't mind, Lionel, because
No,
this
go
is
for
such
it.
a I love this subject so much and especially with my own, healing journey that I went through.
Mm.
So think about this. So what if every person in the world went through a forgiveness exercise and really forgave everyone in their past before they got into a relationship?
Mm.
Because a lot of times we blame the person that we're with for something that happened in our past relationships, right?
Wow. Oh boy. That's heavy.
So heavy and true, unfortunately.
Flo
So
says,
year
Flo says this conversation is amazing. Go okay, go ahead. I'll finish. Finish your point.
well, so years ago, I was training in mindfulness, and I was really becoming aware of what exactly it is I was feeling, and I was feeling angry. And you mentioned
Mm.
it just a little bit ago, and I here I am. I'm a hairstylist, and people would come in, and they're like, "How you doing today?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm angry." And they're like, "Oh, great, and you're gonna cut my hair with sharp instruments near my head? Are you sure that's a good idea?" And I would go, "Yeah, absolutely, it's a great idea. I am just gonna sit with this anger. I'm not gonna act on the anger. I'm just gonna sit with it until I am told by I'm a spiritual person, until I'm
Mm.
told by God on what to do with it." So it was probably, I would say, weeks that I would just
Mm.
notice that I was angry. And one day I am driving to work and I am flipping through the channels on the radio station. And bless his heart, Charles Stanley, that just passed
Yeah.
away,
Yeah.
came on and he said, "Do you have a list of people that you are angry at?" And I went, "Oh my God, that's it. I need a list." And so I'm literally driving down the road and I find a fast food napkin in the console and I unfold it like, however 11 times it's folded. And I take a pen and I'm literally writing, lay it on my lap and I'm writing names on this napkin and I'm filling it up with
Mm.
every single person that I had been holding a grudge towards, that I was just a little, upset with, or that I was full on angry with. And I went, wow, I had no idea I had been harboring all of that anger inside.
Mm.
So then the next thought was, okay, what am I going to do with this list? And again, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to sit with it. I'm going to hold on to it. And until God tells me what to do with it, then I'll act on it.
Mm.
And so there I go. A few weeks later, I was like, okay, I'm going to get all my favorite junk food and anything I want to drink. And I'm going to set up my little place on the couch. And I'm going to write each one of these people a letter.
Mm.
And I did so in a way of really telling them exactly what I wanted to tell them, cuss words and all, regarding the situation that I was harboring those negative feelings, those anger, the being upset about, what I really wanted to tell them, and then I said, "I forgive you." will you forgive me? And then I went in even further and said, God, please forgive me.
Mm.
And while I did that, and it was a whole day affair, there was a box of Kleenex involved and lots of junk food. And I will tell you, at the end of the day, there was no more anger.
Mm.
And there hasn't been since. And if I can do that with someone who tortured me, is how I described it, for 12 years, then
Mm.
I know anyone else out there who hasn't been through something like that can forgive too.
Mm. Wow. Ooh.
Mm.
Ooh.
Wow.
Oh, man. Did y'all feel that one? I felt that. I felt
Mm.
that here. You know, to me, wow, that sounds like what we need to do to really see this into fruition in our lives, Shay, is that we need to understand that God is calling us to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
And we really need to go deep and say, you know what? This is not the way I'm meant to live.
Mm.
This is not the way that I'm meant to be. That that God is calling us to forgive our people who have hurt us in the past. I think that's what we need to do. Because when you're able to see that there's a divine connection in your life between the people you've forgiven and those you're holding grudges and pain, holding them captive, you're missing the potential of what your life can be as it relates to the internal peace you want to experience
Mm.
and that you want to live in. And when you see it
Yeah.
as a divine calling, you're saying that the universe is saying, I'm not meant to be in relationship with other people this way.
Mm.
That I'm called to be, I'm called to show kindness and forgiveness toward others because it does something for us. And I like to tell people all the time, this is what Jesus talked about, making the world over again. He was
Mm-hmm.
talking about living in a world where people did not use vengeance and violence as a way to solve conflict,
Mm-hmm.
but forgiveness. That's why Jesus said, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. They don't understand that perpetual violence, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, everybody's still blind and toothless. You're not
Yeah.
solving anything. And to
Mm.
hold unforgiveness in your heart, you're not solving anything by doing that. You're actually perpetuating the potentiality for hurt and pain in your future. And I would go as far as to say, even in your if you have kids,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
People that you are influenced by, because you know as well as I do, you transfer that emotional energy onto other people. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the dogs can feel it, the cats can feel
Yep.
it.
Yep. Yep.
You know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
that's, I mean, your words are so freeing if we think about it in that way. That's just another way to think about it, what you're saying.
Well, and I would just want to also say that um, the other person that I really needed to forgive was myself.
Mm.
And I really had to write that letter in multiple times because more memories showed up of, oh, yeah, I need to forgive myself on that. And truthfully, I think forgiveness is a process. I don't think it's a one and done type of thing. I think it's an ongoing thing. And for myself, I mean, think about how many times we have that inner negative critic that's constantly going in a loop of, you're not enough, you're not this, you're not
Mm-hmm.
that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really have a chance, an opportunity to make a new choice of forgiveness every single day of ourselves and really be kind to yourself. And you just said it a little bit ago, kind. So it all boils down to, how do we live to love in this world if we cannot fully appreciate and love ourselves? Same goes for kind. How can we be kind to others if we cannot be kind to ourselves? And forgiveness. How can we forgive others if we have not forgiven ourselves? Most of my clients, we go through a forgiveness letter for yourself. We go through it for another person, but then we go through it for yourself of, I forgive for making that left turn when I should have made a right and then it caused a car accident, that type of thing. And, it's like, right, like that, those things that we hold ourselves to such a high regard that we're constantly beating ourselves up about it. We have to forgive ourselves too. And if you're willing to do that while in a relationship, and both parties are willing to figure it, then you're coming almost with a cleaner slate to the table to be able to communicate more effectively.
Wow, man, such a rich conversation. Boy, I can tell you without a doubt, Shay Sparks,
Mhm.
you are setting this stage on fire.
Thank you.
Woo-hoo!
Mhm.
Man. Because what you are really walking us through the process of, yes, we've experienced some things in our past. Yes, it was a personal and people that we loved. It was damaging, it was hurtful, it was painful. But there's a bigger purpose at play here. Your life, my life, how we free ourselves and free others has a tremendous impact on our future. And then I kind of doubled back and said, on the future of the world. If we can
Mm.
just learn how to practice these things of forgiveness, it can be profound. So before we close out here, what closing word, if somebody wants to connect with you, we just take a few minutes to say, hey, here's how you can connect with me. If you want to know more about what I do, how I can help you, because I think all my listeners out there, listen to me. You guys need to connect with Shay. I'm telling you, I feel a sense of calling, of God's calling here. She's powerful in many ways, and I know y'all love her hair because she's on fire. But it's more than that. I can tell you, you can sense it by looking. Those of you who are watching, you can sense it, and those who are listening, it's the tension, the spiritual heightened tension, positive tension is powerful. It's palpable.
Mm.
So you definitely want to connect with her. So just take a minute or so, or 35 seconds or whatever. Just tell people how they can connect with you.
Absolutely. Thank you. You can connect with me at shaysparks.com. That's SHASPARKS.com. And all my social media is on there. You can book a coaching appointment on there if you so desire. But also, connect with me on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, and send me a DM. Like, I love to hear and connect with people. And sometimes people will tell me their life stories in an email. But if I can help or support in any way, shape, or form, and if I am not the right person, I can always refer you to someone else. I have a plethora of people that I know. So yeah, I would love to connect. And how can I support you?
Roger that. Roger that. Wow, what a wonderful moment. Wonderful, wonderful moment, y'all. I have enjoyed this conversation, as I'm sure you have. Everyone out there in LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, man, what a conversation. You guys have got to connect. See, this is what Words for Change is all about. We're bringing people to the table who can create an environment and a conversation that will have a huge impact and change in your life. So the goal is, once you are changed, once your soul is changed, then those around you will experience that change as well. Wow. Great, great, great. I am so glad that, Shay, you have decided we finally made this happen. We got to do another one of these in the future. What do you say?
I would love to. Thank you so much, Lionel, for having this platform and for having me on. So thank you. I would love to come on again.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Well, just hang on as we close on out, okay? We'll talk soon, all right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, Words for Change. What a powerful conversation. Boy, please, please, please make sure you connect with Shay, as she is out all over the social media platforms, on her website. shaysparks.com. All of this stuff for those of you who are listening on Apple or Spotify, your favorite podcast platform. All the information will be in the description, as well as Shay's website, her personal information, her socials, and you can get connected with her. So once again, I am so glad that you guys have come by, and thank you so much for joining us for the Words for Change podcast with our favorite guest, Shay Sparks. Thank you, Joe, for coming in and sharing. Please continue to connect. And hey, we're going to keep pushing this party. We're going to keep changing the world one conversation at a time. See you guys soon. Peace.